Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7 Israel's daily update. I'm Jonathan Hessen, and in today's edition, we will focus on a couple of theaters with chief focus on the Gaza Strip, Egypt, Lebanon, and Syria. Of course, this comes at a time of heightened tensions. But let's turn to introduce our experts for today, to include Mr. Amir Oren, our TV7 Israel editor-at-large. Next to him, Dr. Rafael Barrahi, formerly Spain's National Security Advisor, currently CEO of Worldwide Strategy. And last but certainly not least, Ambassador Dani Ayalon, formerly Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister, as well as Ambassador to the United States. It's great to see all three of you. Ambassador Ayalon, I'd like to start with a question to you. The U.S. President, Donald Trump, has come out and stated yesterday during a Miami America business conference or forum that the United States regards the Middle East as entering into an age of peace. I'd like to be optimistic, but with everything happening currently surrounding Israel, optimism is not always in line with reality.
Yes, well, always good to be with you, Jonathan. I would say the main achievement of Trump was getting the ceasefire, or at least announcing the ceasefire. Whether it will hold or not, we are not sure. Already we have seen many breaches, mostly by Hamas. 2 Israeli soldiers were killed, more were injured. Of course, the 72-hour deadline for releasing or returning back home all the hostages passed long ago, and we still have 6 of them out in Gaza. And there is no preparation, at least not in concrete terms, how to hand over the authority in Gaza, or the control of Gaza, from the Hamas to an interim force, whether it's the ISF, which we still don't know what it will consist of, whether there will be any participation of Palestinian Authority, whether there will be anyone from Hamas in the guise of technocrats. All these things are still up in the air, which shows again that sometimes you cannot really create or change a reality just by wishful thinking. And we have known just from the characteristics of Trump that he does not deal with the minutia. He goes in very large strokes, and he believes that if he says something, everybody will just come to the fold and will act accordingly. I'm not sure that this is the case, and what we see actually now is an embroglio of the Middle East, whereby we have a few major forces. On the one hand, we have Qatar and Turkey, which are on the side of Hamas. On the other hand, we have the moderate Sunnis, Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And in the middle, you find Israel. And unfortunately, we have been relegated. Instead of having a seat at the table, we are on the table. So time will tell how we get out of this. But one thing is certain, that Israel needs much more and better intimate coordination between the White House and the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem.
Indeed. Well, somebody asked me the other day, how do I define Egypt and the Saudis in particular, moderates? I think the term would be pragmatic, much more than moderate, since, of course, but in any case, everything is relative in this world. Mr. Owen, I'd like to ask you, since with regard to the implementation of a resolution at the UN Security Council, the United States and Ambassador Mike Waltz have convened the UN Security Council. They have invited the 4 guarantors, so to speak, of the ceasefire, President Trump's 20 or 21-point plan, to include Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, and the Emirates. And quite interestingly, other than the Security Council and those guarantors, Israel was not present.
The United States is trying to have it both ways, to promise Saudi Arabia and the other Arab nations some future in which the Palestinians will have more of a voice in determining their business, call it self-determination, call it steps towards statehood. The terminology does not really matter as long as the Saudis and others can show the Palestinians a path towards that future. And included in that is the demand for the Palestinian Authority to be reformed so that it will be eligible to participate. But there is, as you say, there is no role for Israel, neither in the diplomatic negotiations nor in the force envisioned for Gaza. The main parties are Egypt and the other moderate or pragmatic Arab and Muslim countries. And Israel has maneuvered itself into a position where it cannot resume the war without approval from Washington, and it cannot sit idly by either for fear that Gaza will come another Lebanon, and we are seeing what is happening with Hezbollah now.
Absolutely. Well, before we do move to the Lebanese front, I do also want to touch briefly on the Egyptian front. But first, Mr. or Dr. Bardahi, when we're looking specifically at what Mr. Oren just mentioned and Ambassador Ayalon noted, it seems like Israel is currently not in the most convenient strategic placing. With that being said, it does have plenty of opportunities to leverage this into new horizons.
Well, Jonathan, having been involved for many decades in the region, I'm always very skeptical of anything that comes with new, stable, or long-lasting, referred to any issue on the region. But I have to say that I believe, really, sincerely, that Israel has big opportunities in the near future. I'm not so convinced that it's worse off now than a few months ago. No? If I were advising the Prime Minister of the government in Jerusalem today, I would say a very simple issue. Look, the world is waiting for you and Israel to be blamed for the failure of the peace plan or the deal or whatever you want to call it, the Trump peace proposal. So try to avoid any trap or counteract in a way that may endanger the future, if there is any future for the second phase, but at least try to avoid not being blamed for the failure in the short term. I think Israel has time, has the ability to deal with tactical operational issues, both within Gaza or around Israel in the north, as we have seen lately. So my diplomatic and political advice is, okay, if there is no future for the deal, let's blame Hamas and other groups from the Palestinian side and not let Israel to be blamed for it. No?
Good advice. With that said, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz came out and stated that the border region with Egypt is a closed military zone at this point in time. Mr. Owen, give us the outline for this statement and what does it actually mean?
Well, the border between Israel and Egypt, which is really also the border between Asia and Africa, runs in a desert area. In Israel, it is called the Negev, the southern part of Israel, and in Egypt, it's the Sinai Peninsula. But the Bedouin tribes who live there do not recognize any international boundaries. Maps do not interest them. They live on both sides of the line, and they are making their living out of smuggling. Whatever is the product of the day or the goods the market wants to bear. It used to be appliances, sometimes it's women, And now, more than simply weapons, it's drones. Now, the drones are both being delivered into Israel in order to serve further in smuggling, and the drones are doing the smuggling themselves. Drugs, for instance, if a drone can drop a drug, they work like Amazon or any other company. And sometimes it's used for espionage and other nefarious activities. So the Israeli Defense Forces have to close the border region so the smugglers and their associates from the Israeli side cannot act freely, and they could be blocked off from further afield, especially within Israel. It has become quite a nuisance and perhaps even a threat.
Thank you, Mr. Oren. Just to clarify for the sake of some of our viewers, maybe, Mr. Oren did not mention or mean to mention or mean to claim that Amazon has a service of delivery of drugs. That does not exist, okay? The main point here, however, is that the Islamist Hamas is utilizing the various smuggling clans or tribes in the Sinai Peninsula, which are affiliated in one way or another to the centers of power in Cairo. Here specifically, anything that moves through the Sinai Peninsula does not happen without the okay of the Tarabin clan, particularly in the northern parts of the Sinai, which are very closely affiliated with Egyptian intelligence. And therefore, in this context, I think that the United States can be very helpful in asserting a new equation in this context. In that same breath, Ambassador Ayalon, we're talking also about a request by the Egyptians to the Americans that Turkey will not send troops into Gaza for fear that this may potentially harm its own national security interests and considerations. What can you tell us about that?
Well, absolutely. I think Israel and Egypt find themselves here in the same boat, that both are threatened by the Islamic, the radical Islamic elements. In this case, it's the Sunnis, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and we know Qatar and Turkey, as we mentioned before, they are the ones who vouch for Hamas, and I think that it would be almost impossible to move ahead if indeed the Turks will have their way, and I am not sure that they can prevail over a joint front of Israel and Egypt together, and I'm sure the Saudis can also be brought into this equation. But Turkey or Qatar in Hamas will ensure the failure of the whole deal, because they will give really all the breaks and slacks to Hamas, and they will always put and prefer their views, and even will cover up for them for continuing digging, and certainly not altogether releasing or giving up their arms. So it is important, and I'm sure that there are thinkings in many capitals here in the Middle East how to actually stop this radical Islam advance that got a lot of boost from Trump's visit in the region, in the Gulf countries. And we see how the relations between the United States and Qatar are actually just skyrocketing with the Defense Pact, with the exchanging of now military bases, including a Qatar training air base in the United States, something that is unprecedented. So we will need to have a lot of influence, and maybe the Saudis can help a lot. The Saudi MBS is on his way to Washington, I guess in a week from now. And I would advise very much a very close coordination on this issue between Egypt and Israel and Saudi Arabia.
Well, Dr. Barrahi, the Egyptians have played also a positive role in messaging in the region, particularly in Lebanon, where they sent a number of times an envoy to convey to the Iranian proxy Hezbollah that they better disarm. That was also conveyed, of course, to the government, particularly President Joseph Aoun, Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, as well as the Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri, who does also represent Hezbollah in this context, despite heading a different Shia organization in this context, namely Amal. This is not the only messaging that occurred. Also, Israel has warned time and again. The United States, Tom Barrack, just earlier this week, called Lebanon a failed state and warned that unless they come to terms or rather take hold of themselves and start implementing the various pledges that they have under the current cessation of hostilities, it may erupt into something very dangerous for that country. Today we see a significant uptick in Israeli strikes after Hezbollah said that it will start to respond to Israeli attacks on Lebanon. No response yet, but what is your take?
Well, Jonathan, I think, as usual, it's a very complex situation, but the final question here is whether we like to have a government and the institutions in place in Beirut that, with time and help, may prevent Hezbollah from reconstituting itself, or because we need to act in the short term, we are endangering this evolution, and we may push back their willingness, if they have any, to do so. No? So I think it's a complex situation, and the Israeli government has to balance the need to react to Hezbollah threat, but also to try not to undermine the new attitudes of the leaders in Beirut that apparently they are committed to implement all the pledges that you mentioned that they did to the international community, including the United States. Here again, it's like the issue of Turkey and Qatar in Gaza. They were the two major ambassadors and supporters of Hamas, but the success of President Trump, I think one of them is to bring them into the table supporting the deal. So if we are trying to prevent them to become or rebranding Hamas or defending in the future, let them clash with Washington, not with Jerusalem. So I think we need to be clever now because we have time. We have time until the end of the year. They are not going to reconstitute neither Hamas or Hezbollah in that framework. So let's let the actor play out and see how President Trump reacts. You know? And in the case of Lebanon, be clever. Don't push the government backwards against Israel now because I think they were moving in the right direction very slowly. Deal tactically and operationally in a limited way and fashion against the emerging potential threat in southern Lebanon from Hezbollah, but don't ruin the prospect of positive evolution. I think that's my vision.
I couldn't agree more. And as President Trump proved time and again, he defies the laws of gravity, as you mentioned a couple of times. And it really doesn't make sense, but sometimes it works out somehow. With that being said, Mr. Oren, I agree with Dr. Barahi that Israel, does the saying in Israel go? Adif liot chacham asher tzodek. It's better to be wise than right all the time. So why not pursue the smart path in here and try to recalibrate the equation vis-a-vis Lebanon?
Regarding the law of gravity, we still have to wait and see whether whatever comes up does not fall at the end. It's too early to pass judgment. And the dilemma in all of these cases is how to get someone who is both friendly and ferocious vis-a-vis your foe. Take, for instance, the Muslim Brotherhood under Morsi in Egypt in 2012. It was good for Israel that there was such a regime in order to restrain Hamas during Operation Pillar of Defense later that year, so that no ground troops were needed to be sent into Gaza. but this was operational. Strategically, of course, it was a negative development for Israel. The same may be said about Arafat vis-a-vis Hamas. Yes, we needed a strong Palestinian force against those who were even more extreme than it, but we didn't want it to be so strong as to threaten us. And here we are faced with, let's say, Turkey in Gaza or Turkey in Syria, and of course the repercussions in Lebanon. It's a very fine line, and we haven't found how to walk along it yet.
Ambassador Ayalon, we don't have very much time left, but nonetheless, this needs to be asked. Right now, the humanitarian conditions in the southern Syrian governorate of Sueda are deteriorating. As we speak, the humanitarian conditions are abysmal, with acute deficiency in both medicine as well as water and grain, with no capacity to be self-sustainable in light of the atrocities committed in July, when the government and government-aligned troops have pretty much destroyed much of the wells that provided water to the governorate, as well as the grain silos and other aspects there. And this area is still under siege. The United States has pledged to improve the humanitarian conditions there. Damascus said it would do so as well. The Jordanians were supposed to assist here. And quite frankly, Damascus is proving to have lied about it, since they are really using the humanitarian route that they have established as a tool of war. The only alternative would be to do it not through Damascus, and such a humanitarian route is something that would benefit all sides, potentially even under international supervision. How is there a possibility, or what type of possibility is there in order to make such a humanitarian corridor possible, particularly from Hadir to Sueda, or from Jordan to Sueda, to be able to really allow the people there to sustain life?
Well, Jonathan, I think you're right. This is the only way to really assure some sort of stability in Syria, although it will be very, very difficult. And most importantly, to really defend the real allies here of the United States or Israel or the moderate forces, namely the Druze in Sueda or in Syria. We can also talk later about the Kurds as well. But we see how Mr. Trump is putting all his, I would say, his cash on El Julani, inviting him to Washington, actually freeing Syria from all the sanctions. And on the other hand, we don't see any steps, any positive steps on the ground from the Syrian government. And here, I believe, again, it will take a coalition of moderate, or as you mentioned, mostly pragmatic Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia mostly, because and Saudi Arabia is the only one that has a chance actually to fend off any Turkish increased influence in Syria. So here again, it all comes to the decision in Washington. And with Washington agreeing, I think the humanitarian corridor would be very much feasible. And we have to be also forward-looking, because we're talking about Turkey, but we should keep also the eye on the ball, which is Iran. Iran, after losing Syria, after losing Lebanon, they may try to go to their next or other alternative, which I'm afraid will be Jordan. So Jordan could be under a lot of jeopardy. We already know from intelligence resources that in Iraq, they are preparing massive militias with thousands of fighters, which again could be a source of instability throughout the region. But Jordan is the one that we must look and protect most.
Dr. Barrahi, I'd like to hear your take on the Syrian file, since it seems like, there were a couple of massacres that occurred over the last couple of months. And the American envoy to Syria, namely Tom Barrack, who is a genuinely a nice person and is keen on reaching the goals that the president has mandated him to do, has called those massacres hiccups. I don't understand how you can refer to massacres as hiccups. And then look at the scenario in which Damascus is in a position where it does not really advance U.S. national security interests. The Russians maintain all leverage due to the fact that there is a drought of biblical magnitude currently plaguing that country. And the only ones who can assist the Syrians in this case are the Russians. So try and put it to us in layman's terms. How can we fix this issue without seeing everything crumble before our eyes?
Well, you need to square the circle, no? You need to keep the Russians out, the Turkish down, and the government up, no? And in Damascus, with the help of the United States and other countries, as Ambassador Ayalon said, particularly Saudi Arabia. But I think we don't need here to be very alarmed. I think what Tom Barrack's try is to fence off the criticism of President Trump meeting the president of Syria in the coming week. The Americans has been negotiating a military stable and permanent presence near Damascus. There is also negotiations and talks about security arrangement between Israel and Syria. So things are moving under the table. And I think this is a positive sign. So let's be relatively optimistic that the things will not derail and in the short term. And in any case, if things go wrong, we still have the ability to counter-react. No?
Absolutely. Well, the only thing that I would highlight is everything can go right so long as a humanitarian corridor is opened up down south, because that is not something that Israel can allow, since there will be too much impact on the situation along its border, and also it will create friction that the Damascus regime does not want to deal with. But nonetheless, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Mr. Amir Oren, Dr. Rafael Barrahi, and Ambassador Dani Ayalon for all of your valuable insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.